Before we get started, I actually just have a favor to ask you guys. If you can hear me properly, do you mind just using the raise hand function in Zoom just so that I know? Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Wow, a lot of people are listening. Awesome. So good morning, good afternoon. I know I had said that already, but if you haven't joined, welcome. Um, my name is Saoirse Hinksman. I'm the marketing manager for Benu Networks. I also have Mike McFarland here with me. He's our VP of product. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Saoirse. I run product management at Benu Networks and have been with the company for about, I think, 9-10 months now, but have about 20 years of experience in Wi-Fi and networking, and looking forward to a great discussion today.
So long story short, we're actually in great hands. So I know that today is going to be a little bit different of a session. Obviously, we're kind of in an unprecedented state of things. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to join. Real quick, before we actually jump into any content, I just want to make everybody aware of some of the functions in Zoom. So obviously, I had you guys test out the hand raising function. Thanks for doing that. Another one of the key things that I want to share with you guys is the Q&A function. So as we go along, feel free to type in any questions at any point, and I'll try and get them answered as quick as possible. If I don't do it right when you send it, don't worry. We have some time allotted at the end to address those questions as well. And then if at any point, if we don't answer those questions, just feel free to reach out to us. I doubt that that will happen, but just in case. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. I know that some of you are more familiar with Benu than others, so I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of background on us. We were established in 2010, so we've been around for a while now. Obviously had a lot of time to really optimize our products and our offerings and adapt as the market sort of changed, as new innovations come out, which is great. What our main goal is to really simplify edge applications and the way that we interact with those. So we have a global footprint. Our main headquarters are in Boston, but we do have other locations scattered across the globe. We're an industry leader in Wi-Fi access gateways, which we'll get into obviously in more detail later on during this session. And in terms of our team, we're really an engineering-led team. Most of our employees are on that, the engineering side of things, which is great. We obviously have a lot of great minds working on innovative solutions to help you guys be able to serve your customers in the best way that you can. So as I had mentioned previously, we were started in 2010, and since then we've evolved as the market evolved. But one thing that remained constant is our ability to deploy at major operators across the world. A sample of them is listed here. And one of the things that we really wanted to sort of highlight and make you guys aware of is the fact that we have carrier grade hardware and software for businesses of all sizes. So we really are able to scale on each side of the spectrum. So there's no job too small, no job too big that we can't sort of tackle and help you get there and serve your customers in the best way that you can. So I had mentioned a couple slides ago as well that we're a leader in Wi-Fi access gateways. So just to give you guys some idea of the volume that we're working with, we process over 7 petabytes of data a day, and we have 24 million connected wireless LAN APs and CPE gateways. And to put that into perspective, that's more traffic than all the North American mobile operators combined. So we're not talking about a small scale in terms of our experience and what we're working with and what we're processing for our deployments. So over the last couple of years, we've really been able to build a really reliable set of products that companies all over the globe are able to trust and use to make sure that their customers can get connected. So today, I kind of mentioned this earlier. Obviously, we're in a really weird place right now globally in terms of the coronavirus pandemic and how we adjust and respond to what's going on, and how we're able to help all the stakeholders that are involved with our business and, even just within our personal lives as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that and what that means for us, what that means for you guys. And then I'll hand the mic over to Mike and he can run through some of the benefits of a next generation network, why a wireless access gateway is helpful in that case. And then we'll obviously go into further detail about our Wi-Fi access gateway, how you can use that, what those deployments look like. And then, as I had mentioned before, we'll address any questions that you guys have. But feel free to type them in at any point, and I'll try and bring them up as we go so it can feel more like a conversation rather than just sort of us presenting as well. So one of the things that we've seen over the last month or so is really that as people shift to, millions of people are now working from home. Their kids are at home trying to connect to whether their school or if they're playing video games while you're trying to get on a Zoom call. One of those things that you really rely on is connectivity. And so for service providers and operators, it's really important to make sure that that connectivity is stable, it's reliable, it's performant, it's not, acting up at any point, just so that we can help everybody adjust as best as they can. And one of the things that we're really seeing is obviously a surge in traffic, and sort of trying to adjust that surge, which obviously wasn't there previously, especially from a residential perspective. So it's just something to keep in mind as we move along. And this is something that isn't necessarily, obviously, unfortunately, the coronavirus is a pandemic. It's not isolated to one specific area. So globally, we're seeing this traffic change, and seeing operators and service providers have to adjust to that accordingly and figure out, what are some changes that they can make to really keep everybody afloat. So some of the ways that service providers and operators can really help their customers during this time, obviously connectivity is very, a very broad term, but some of the use cases that we've seen from our customers and from other companies in the market that they're rolling out that have been really particularly helpful for people, of course, are community Wi-Fi, any hotspot networks, mobile offload, trying to adjust traffic there, being able to manage your network properly, and then obviously having visibility into your network and making sure that when something does go wrong, you're able to remedy it as fast as possible. And obviously it would be ideal to be able to do this in a contact-free environment. And so having the tools available to help you do that is really, really important. And so we'll go over a couple of these today, and just show how we can help you some of those places, whether it's deploying community Wi-Fi, setting up hotspots, mobile offload, or really just getting additional visibility in your network so that you can have a better understanding of how to fix any issues that may arise. Now, all that being said, we know that this is not something that's easily just turned on. From both an infrastructure perspective and just a realistic deployment perspective, it's really tough to be able to keep your staff safe, your customer safe, while trying to do all of these things, because you're obviously limited in terms of truck rolls, in terms of being able to be there physically. And obviously getting new things started is not something that, is done in an instant. Otherwise, we'd be doing it every minute of every day. So we're going to walk you through what our vision of a next generation network looks like, and then how we can help you during this time to make it as easy and seamless as possible. So I'll hand it over to Mike McFarland if you want to get started and go into a little bit more detail about our solution and how we can help.
Sure, thanks, Shirsha. So I'm just gonna switch over here to my slides. Can you see my slides? Saoirse?
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. I was talking. But
Yeah.
yes, we can see your screen. I was just saying I'm going to also launch a poll while we're waiting. Feel free to answer those whenever you get a chance, and I'll keep an eye on those and share them in a little bit.
Okay, great. So, so why a next-gen network? Let's first get into some of the drivers behind this. And, you know, when we talk about next-gen Wi-Fi, what we're really referring to here is 802.11ax. Some people also refer to it as high-efficiency wireless. And, of course, the most common usage or name is Wi-Fi 6. And when considering what types of customers are going to be most interested in doing an upgrade to Wi-Fi 6 or deploying a new Wi-Fi 6 network, you want to look for a couple things. One is situations where there's dense user environments, because Wi-Fi 6 does have some improvements in terms of its capabilities there, as well as high performance connectivity. And even going beyond that, you want to look for customers that are going to derive value from the Wi-Fi network. So they're either creating new revenue streams, they need to, you know, the end user experience is essential to customer satisfaction, or it could be they want to have better visibility or management over their Wi-Fi services. Or they may have some next-gen services that they want to run that require a higher performance from their Wi-Fi network. So generally speaking, in terms of the use cases that we find that meet these requirements or these drivers, these are some of them. So public or community Wi-Fi networks, where users can get on to Wi-Fi networks, you know, throughout a city or town. Hotspot networks, sort of similar, usually in different locations, business locations, et cetera. Mobile offload has been of some particular interest of recent because there is more network traffic. Mobile networks are quite loaded. Smart cities, hospitality Wi-Fi, of course, is hospitality is often rated significantly based on the Wi-Fi and internet experience. So particularly for business travelers who really rely on the Wi-Fi to be connected. K through 12 and university has very high density of users, so another good application for Wi-Fi 6. Same thing with venues, of course, and multi-dwelling units where you have a high number of users in a relatively small location. And enterprise Wi-Fi, of course, generally has needs for very high performance connectivity as they roll out new applications and in some cases, some high bandwidth applications. So when you find customers that would be a potential target for a Wi-Fi 6 rollout, they will have some concerns. And some of the things that we most commonly hear is that they want the performance of Wi-Fi 6, but without finding that advanced features are going to eliminate the performance benefits. And when I say advanced features, it could be related to quality of service capabilities, traffic management, or segmentation of traffic. It could be related to a variety of kind of user-specific policies. And the other thing, of course, that's related to that is network security. So a lot of times, advanced features we run on our networking equipment is related to security. And so they don't want to have to compromise network security, obviously, in this day and age, to in order to take advantage of the performance of Wi-Fi 6. Another aspect is spending a fortune on other network component upgrades, because Wi-Fi 6 does increase the overall throughput of the Wi-Fi network. And so there's other networking components, both on the control plane and the data plane, that will now have to support a higher data rate if you are going to achieve the performance benefits. So that's another thing that they will raise potentially as a concern. And then lastly, whenever there's a change to the network and some sort of upgrade, there's always the concern from IT professionals that there would be some sort of unexpected user experience problems, and the user experience is, of course, paramount. So you need to have ways to, address that. So the solution that is going to have most success with customers is one that supports advanced features at Wi-Fi 6 speeds, so there's no compromises, is highly secure, can scale end to end without a large amount of cost, and offers visibility into the user experience. So let's talk about how Benu is changing the market. So we are a leader in Wi-Fi access gateways, and some of the capabilities that we provide is to address some of these needs of customers. One is to be able to provide a feature-rich solution at Wi-Fi 6 speeds. We have a lot of functionality related to security, and doing that in an intelligent way. We provide a very scalable solution, as Shirsha showed earlier in the deck, that we have been deployed at a lot of tier 1 carriers with very large networks. And so we've worked quite a bit on ensuring that our software can scale to not only high number of users, but also high number of throughput and a combination of two at the same time. And then we also have specific tools for monitoring in the real-time user experience, such that the network group doesn't have to be concerned about whether the user experience is going well. So where does the Wi-Fi Access Gateway sit in the network? So there's two types of networks that we might be connected to. So the Wi-Fi access points could be connected into the LAN, or they could be connected into the carrier access network. So obviously, in the case of a LAN, this is more of an enterprise type deployment, and for a carrier access network, this is more for a broadband deployment where you have maybe lots of smaller businesses or entities that are connecting through a carrier access network into our Wi-Fi access gateway. And then generally speaking, in either case, the traffic is headed off to the internet. It could be going off to, sort of a VPN service or something like that, but generally speaking, most of the traffic is headed to the internet.
Hey, Mike, we had a good question come in asking if we have a virtual deployment option for WAG. So do we have a VWAG?
And we definitely have a VWAG, and we'll go through some of the product options as we get further along, but we have a virtualized option as well. So let's talk a little bit about the network architecture, and specifically how we're enabling a feature-rich and what we would argue is a future-proof solution for Wi-Fi at Wi-Fi 6 speeds. So your access points, again, are either connected to a LAN or a broadband network, and then from there to a what we call a business access gateway for these sort of on-premise deployments, or the Wi-Fi access gateway, which is more for a network-based deployment in a carrier network. And the big distinction here between an access point and one of these gateways is the processing power, right? So the access points generally have a relatively small CPU that has a few cores to it, and does have the capabilities for forwarding traffic at high rates. But when you start to get into more advanced functions, that causes the throughput to generally go down compared to if you were to run those functions on a access gateway where we have up to 56 core processors in some of these platforms. And so with this large processing power, the features don't impact the performance. And so therefore, if you do want to run a feature-rich environment, but still at the Wi-Fi 6 speeds, you're going to want to put some of those functions into a gateway. Or alternatively, maybe you're not rolling out advanced features now, but you anticipate in the next few years, you want to have that future-proof capability to add new capabilities. This is a great way to ensure that, such that you're not having to upgrade all the access points later. So you might choose to purchase a little bit less expensive access point up front, but you invest in the access gateway, and that still gives you then the ability to run any kind of security feature or traffic management feature or subscriber capabilities without having to swap out the access points to something that's more expensive and more capable. So when we see actual sort of results, there's a fairly stark difference in terms of performance when you implement these features on Wi-Fi access points. So from talking to customers, we've learned that when they turn on some of these features here on the bottom right, like content filtering or application detection, web security, per user QoS and analytics, these features generally all require some sort of packet inspection on the data plane. And they see a fairly significant drop in the performance throughput of their platforms. Whereas if you have a properly sized access gateway, you can run all those features and do so at the rate at which traffic is being sent on the Wi-Fi network, so at the line rate. And so that is what you want to achieve if you want to have that full Wi-Fi 6 experience. Another aspect that we mentioned was security challenges. So Wi-Fi 6, because it's higher speed, gives hackers a multi-gigabit attack vector. And so whenever you give the hackers a larger pipe to attack with, it becomes more of a threat. So security becomes increasingly important as you increase the bandwidth in your network. The other challenge, of course, is that any guest, contractor, student, a vendor in a venue, or even employees could be a threat. And so generally speaking, you want to take a zero trust approach. And now that most applications are cloud-based, right? We used to have all our applications inside, the business, inside the premise. We had a very clear boundary between what was on-prem, what was in the internet, and now with the applications being cloud-based, you have this sort of amorphous boundary where the internet is where your business applications are running. And so you have this very important, legitimate traffic going back and forth between the premise and the internet. And then you could have, of course, a lot of security threats coming from the internet. So that also complicates things. So to address that, and this is where, having been deployed with 24 million CPEs or access points connected to our platform in tier 1 carriers, we've really had to build the security capabilities that are considered carrier class and stand up to the scrutiny of tier 1 operators. So the first thing is you need to have protection from unauthenticated guests and users, but also from the authenticated guests and users. So the solution has a bunch of capabilities for both of these different types of users. You also need to have network access control, so dynamic microsegmentation of users at the authentication stage, and per user policies. These could include QoS prioritization, data rate limits, access control lists or ACLs. You might even later on some content filtering, web security. You might have data volume limits for guest users. So a variety of per user policies that can be implemented. The Benu solution also includes layer 3 and 4 security. So stateful firewall and that. We also do protection against DNS attacks and denial of service or DOS attacks. There's control plane protections, as well as protection against malformed packets and fragmentation. And we also have the ability to mirror any kind of policy-based packet drops over to another device for further reconnaissance and research. So if you are seeing a high number of packets being dropped because they're violating one of your security policies, you want to know about that and be able to dig into that in more detail. And then we also support layer 7 security. So content filtering, or some people refer to this as parental filtering, where you can restrict kind of what types of websites people are going to based on the classification of their content. Web security, so protecting people from malicious sites, as well as malware and phishing protection. Phishing, by the way, is one of the most common ways that hackers get in, right? An email that has a bad link to it, to a bad website, and that's a very common type of attack. So an important protection layer that we can provide. The other capability that we provide is to help scale the network. And when we mentioned earlier, when you upgrade to Wi-Fi 6, you could have a cascade of upgrades that need to be done, ranging from the wireless LAN controller, the DHCP server, the router, the firewall. All these components are essential to the network to operate, and traffic flows through them to get to the internet. So what we have done is, in our solution, in our Access Gateway, we combine essentially all these functions into one platform. And like I mentioned earlier, we do this at scale, and so this enables us to support Wi-Fi 6 performance on our platform without having to go through an upgrade of all these individual devices, which can get costly. And so we have a variety of solutions at different scaling levels. So we refer to our appliance-based platforms as XMEGs. And so we have the XMEG 1 that will do up to 14 gigabits per second. And then we have all the way up to the XMEG 200 that will do 200 gigabits per second. And then, of course, we also have our virtualized solution. To give you a little bit more detail about that, again, we refer to our Business Access Gateway as the platform that is really designed for on-premise deployments. This supports up to 1,000 APs, so it can be quite a large deployment, as well as 20,000 clients, 10 million sessions, and 14 gigabits per second. When you move up to the Wi-Fi Access Gateway platforms, you can support up to 1 million APs, 1 million clients, 512 million sessions. And we have some intermediate, of course, scaling between these, the XMEG 200 and the XMEG 1. So there's the XMEG 10, the XMEG 100. And then if someone wants to run a virtual machine, they can. So that is certainly possible. And then you can choose any Intel-based hardware and kind of run the scale that you want to run at. And we support KVM, VMware, and OpenStack. In these WAG deployments, I think there was a question about whether we're supporting our own AAA solution in this. We do not support a AAA server in these platforms, so you would want to use a separate AAA platform for the, which is, there's of course open source AAA solutions, as well as other commercial solutions that we've worked with. Okay. So another thing that we talked about earlier is with any kind of network upgrade or change, you want to be able to assure the customer that their user experience is not going to have issues. And so we have two things that, two different products that help support that. One is the Benu SSA, which is the subscriber session analytics tool. And this allows you to understand the usage of the network, and you can slice and dice the data in a variety of ways. So you can look at it by SSID, by access point, by VLAN, or even by user device. And then there's also our Benu Boss solution, which is a user experience monitoring solution. And this allows for proactive management of the customer experience. And one of the key values of this is, of course, not only knowing whether the users are having a good experience, but you can avoid truck rolls because we provide a fairly specific remote diagnosis of what the issue is. I want to actually show you an example of a BOSS screen. BOSS stands for Benu Operations Subscriber Simulator, and it's doing essentially just that. It's simulating subscribers by putting an agent in a VM on the premise, and wherever you want to measure performance from. And then that agent can either act like an access point or act like a client. And that agent is then measuring the response times that it gets for DHCP, whether it be IPv4 or v6. It's also measuring response times for DNS, as well as response times for HTTP and other metrics as well. But this is a sample output of showing where you can see there is a stacked chart here showing the response times for all those things together, the DHCP, the DNS, and the HTTP. And you can see that there's something funky going on, something strange going on with DHCP at certain times, right? Where the green bar suddenly gets really high and you have this lag in performance. And so this would be a clear indication that, someone needs to look into what's going on with the DHCP server and the DHCP traffic. So just to sort of summarize our solution here, the idea is to make sure that you can have a feature-rich capability at Wi-Fi 6 speeds. And this is something that we do really at a fraction of the cost, both in terms of the fact that the solution just has very good price-performance ratio, but the other fact is that you could potentially use less expensive, less feature-rich Wi-Fi APs that still have the Wi-Fi 6 throughput and performance, but don't, aren't trying to implement too many things and put those more advanced functions onto the access gateway. Intelligent security. So, like I mentioned earlier, Wi-Fi 6 speeds give hackers a big pipe. And so advanced security and user policies are really required in Wi-Fi 6. Otherwise, you could really give a hacker a very large attack vector. So using the centralized gateway architecture, the security can be done very cost effectively, and you have a little bit more visibility as to how an attack might be being done across a variety of APs or towards a variety of endpoints, because you have a more centralized point of enforcement. You want the solution to be scalable end to end, and so this is where I think we really help alleviate the cost of all the various upgrades that might have to occur on routers and firewalls and controllers. And then the last one is the real-time user experience visibility, which we just talked about with the BOSS solution and the SSA for the analytics. So where is the Benu gateways typically deployed? For our Wi-Fi Access Gateway, it's typically deployed in these environments, so community or public Wi-Fi networks, mobile offload, and smart cities. And then for our Business Access Gateway, or the T refers to a trusted Business Access Gateway, that's more for the mobile offload case. Those deployments are in, again, places where there's either dense user environments or a need for high performance along with advanced functionality. So venues, MDUs, hospitality all have very dense user environments, and the Wi-Fi experience is becoming more and more critical to the user's satisfaction with a venue or an MDU or hospitality. And then for campus and small medium enterprise education, they oftentimes want to run fairly advanced security capabilities, and in some cases have very high density of users as well. So these drive our deployments. I wanted to actually give some examples of some of the network architectures. So getting a little bit more technical here and showing how we fit into specific deployments and some examples of these. So one example is for a Wi-Fi hotspot network where you have, in this case, oftentimes a service provider type of deployment where they would add a second SSID onto home Wi-Fi or business Wi-Fi or even outdoor Wi-Fi APs. And this second SSID would generally carry their brand, and that then allows their subscribers to connect on that access point in a seamless way. And this could be either for fixed operators, or it could be offloading offloading mobile users onto these Wi-Fi access points, and then the traffic goes back to the mobile operator. And within this type of deployment, we're providing some authentication and authorization and accounting capabilities as we interface to either a AAA or a portal for the authentication. We're doing the IP addressing of the end users, or doing the NAT for those users as they connect to the internet. We're doing bandwidth management and also service policies, providing security. In the case of carriers, also providing lawful intercept and analytics. One of the things I want to highlight about this is, generally speaking, the Wi-Fi access points are already there. So if it's doing home as a hotspot or a business hotspot, these are probably carrier customers already. You've already got the Wi-Fi there. You've already provided them the broadband connection. So the only thing you're really adding is a couple components in your core network. And this allows you to have this service rolled out with relatively minimal investment, with huge business benefits. And I want to just give an example. So Comcast is one of our customers. It's a very large network. They've got over 10 million home, business, and outdoor APs that are deployed with their Xfinity hotspot service. And so whenever you go to one of those locations, you'll see not only the home or business SSID, but you'll also see the Xfinity SSID. And so you can connect to that if you are a Comcast subscriber. And you can do that for free as a Comcast subscriber. So they have, over 7 million sessions each day. And, for them to make this investment, there were some key drivers, right? One is it increases the subscriber retention. So the subscribers now feel like, hey, this is an added benefit for me, and that I get free Wi-Fi in, millions of locations that I might go and visit. Or if I even, as simple as, if I go to a friend or family's other house, I can connect potentially to their Wi-Fi without having to ask them for the password and whatnot. I just connect onto the Xfinity SSID. They also generate a lot of pay-as-you-go Wi-Fi revenue. So if you're not a Comcast subscriber, you subscribe to the service by, paying a fee. And I think you can do that, on a monthly basis, or you can do it as a one time. And then there's, of course, the benefit of the branding. So, think about every time someone looks for a Wi-Fi network, they're seeing Comcast Xfinity. It's like having, millions of advertisements across the country. So there's definitely a branding benefit that comes along with this as well. And just keeping top of mind with consumers, your brand.
And hey, Mike, one more thing before we hop over to this managed Wi-Fi that I wanted to note is specifically during this pandemic, one of the things that Comcast has really done a great job of is leveraging that Wi-Fi hotspot network to be able to offer that to individuals across the country to be able to have access to the internet, especially obviously things are going a little bit awry. It's very unplanned. And so I think people are obviously struggling. And this is one of those areas that really gives you the ability to reach out a hand and help when you can. So if that's something that you are concerned with, this is a really great way to get involved and to be able to set up a network with like minimal rollout effort in the grand scheme of things. So this is one of the things that I just wanted to highlight as well from that lens.
That's a great point, Saoirse, because I know for a fact they've had a huge increase in the traffic on this network since everyone's been working remotely. And I think it's really they're committed to increasing the general, increasing access. And so this is something that at relatively low cost, any carrier can roll out and improve the availability of internet access to their to not only their subscribers, but to anyone in the community as a service to them. This may be less applicable, I guess, given this situation. No one's at hotels or venues so much right now, but we do have deployments where they're using a similar architecture for providing managed Wi-Fi to hotels and venues. And this is a deployment where there's hundreds of hotels that are connecting and being managed by the carrier and providing the guest Wi-Fi services and hotspot services. Another type of deployment is for campus and venues. And in this case, you see that there's a variety of types of networks or users in a venue. There's the guests, of course, who are attending the event, but there's also a need for a private Wi-Fi network for the employees and staff that are working there, as well as other applications. There's Internet of Things all over the place now at this point in venues, and those generally require different policies, different security. There's vendors that are in these venues that are third parties that probably need to have different policies enforced, as well as then you may have some sort of public Wi-Fi for people out in the out in the parking area and et cetera, that might have different levels of access than those who are guests inside the stadium or venue. And so we do a variety of functions and capabilities in those environments. Daytona is a very well-known race course, and so they have invested in having also very fast Wi-Fi, and so we are deployed. That's one example of a deployment. Venues can also be transport hubs, so subways, airports, train stations, and so this is another type of deployment that we are deployed in. And so there's, venues really covers a large different, there's a large variety of types of venues. We also get deployed into MDU environments. And again, you have a variety of different users, use cases. So there's going to be the private Wi-Fi for the tenants. There's guests that come into the building. There's also office Wi-Fi or staff that maybe work in the MDU, and then IoT. So again, handling all those different policies, and you might be varying, the way the devices authenticate. You might be changing the way, what kind of mobility they have. You'd certainly be changing the security and traffic segmentation, and whether devices can see each other or not on the network. So there's a lot of different policies that can be implemented on this. And then on the connection to the internet and the network, you might want to have a secure VPN connection to a data center for the IoT devices, whereas the private Wi-Fi, guest Wi-Fi is really just headed out to the internet. So a lot of different things that we support and enable flexibility of, essentially supporting 5 networks on one physical infrastructure. So, an example of a deployment like that that's leveraging those capabilities would be at Vodafone, which recently acquired Unity Media. This is a deployment in Germany, in fact, and they have a very large number of MDUs that are under management. Schools, I think the world is going to be different now that we have gone to remote education, and so I think use of online tools and connectivity is going to increase in schools in the future when we go back to school. And so having that infrastructure in the schools, of course, also being able to provide remote access to school, tools and applications is important. So this is an area where I think there will be increased investment as schools learn that they can become more digital oriented. So that covers the material we wanted to go over today. I think, Shirsha, we wanted to leave some time here for questions, and I think we successfully did that. So
yeah, and we have a couple in here too that I was hanging on to until we got to this point to run through. So I'll just go ahead and rattle those off. So one of the first questions was regarding security for WAG, in terms of, do we have any security against MAC spoofing specifically?
So for MAC spoofing, we do have capabilities to protect against that. And so that capability can be implemented, either via a variety of different capabilities. We have a blacklisting capability for MAC addresses that are identified as being malicious or somehow violating policies. And then there's also the authentication aspect where the MAC address can be denied.
Cool. Another question we had was regarding hotspots. So in the Comcast example, do they have XMEGs, so in Benu appliances, or is it just a VWAG? Or maybe a mix of both?
Right, so right now they happen to be using our appliance-based solution, but we also have other carriers that are using our VMEGs, the virtual machines.
Okay.
I'd say it's a mix, probably about 50-50, if I were to guess.
Gotcha. And then in the campus example, how are the IoT devices connected to Wi-Fi 6? So, for example, the point of entry cameras, smart lamps, any of those sorts of devices?
So I think in a lot of those cases, actually, the IoT devices probably don't support Wi-Fi 6 yet, but they're connected to, when you deploy a Wi-Fi 6 network, it's backward compatible to, older Wi-Fi technologies so that older clients can also connect. So generally speaking, those IoT devices would be connected probably at this point, most of them through an older Wi-Fi version. And there's probably also cases, actually, I know there's other cases where the IoT devices are using a protocol that is, not an IP. It's like they're using like Zigbee or some other wireless capability, and those usually connect into a hub. which then often connects through our gateway and gets various policies, sometimes even like a VPN of traffic over to a data center for that IoT traffic.
Okay, great. And then for the venue Wi-Fi solution specifically, does that have a built-in guest portal?
So right now for the venue solution, the guest portal is usually provided by a separate platform. We do have a guest portal that is part of our MDU solution. But for the venues where you might have, generally speaking, they have some specific requirements for the portal. And so we usually have partnered with other companies in that situation.
And then which APs are supported on the Benu WAG as a wireless LAN controller?
So we've actually, if you think about the wireless LAN controller functionality, there's really kind of two high-level aspects to it. One is the management of the Wi-Fi APs, and so that's where it's helping with managing the software updates of the APs. It's also helping with managing the radios and which channels that they're using, those kind of aspects. We do not actually replace that functionality. You can generally get that from their cloud-based solutions, and you don't have to necessarily use the Wi-Fi, an on-premise wireless LAN controller for those. The other aspect of a wireless LAN controller, though, that does drive the need for being on-premise would be to do all the data plane capabilities. So if you're doing packet inspection to look for security threats, or you're using it for specific traffic management policies, and you're trying to do micro-segmentation of different types of users, that also drives the need for wireless LAN controller. It's another key capability there, and that is the functionality that we would essentially replace. And so we've worked with a variety of different access point vendors for that. And in the case of a lot of on-premise deployments, people are just using standard VLANs, and so we can basically interact with any vendor's Wi-Fi access point. In that, we've been deployed with Cambium and Ruckus and Cisco and a whole bunch of different vendors. We've also worked with more residential gateway type Wi-Fi vendors like Hytron and Compal and Eris, or Eris now part of CommScope. And so there's a pretty broad set of Wi-Fi access points that we've worked with.
Great. And so I don't know if you'll know this off the top of your head, but do you happen to know what the highest network throughput with VWAG that we have in production?
I do not know that off the top of my head, so we'd have to follow up on that one.
Sounds good. I figured, but I wanted to ask it anyway. And then is there a role for WAG in Wi-Fi calling? And do we have any such deployments out there today for that?
It depends a little bit on how the Wi-Fi calling is implemented. And so we would have to get into a discussion as to how they were implementing the Wi-Fi calling. I mean, we're providing an IP connection, but it depends on, who's providing the Wi-Fi calling and how it's being implemented from the device. If they are using a specific, if they're looking for a specific architecture, we need to discuss that.
Okay. So I think that is the last of the questions that we have. I'm going to launch a poll really quickly. Feel free to answer it. I'll keep that hovered here. But if you guys have any additional questions while we're here, feel free to just throw them in to the Q&A function. And if there's anything that you forget, just feel free to reach out to me. All of your invites should have my email associated with it. So you can just go ahead and respond to that, and I can get you back any answers that we didn't have today. We can follow up with you on that. Okay. All right, so I'll go ahead and leave this poll open. If you guys just want to vote before you leave, that would be great. If not, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. I know this is an odd time to be here. But we got one more question in as well, so I'll address that too. So is there a REST API that we can, or that you can bring in an HTTPS URL widget as a walled garden from another system? Hard to get out right now. But Mike, do we have a REST API that they can use to do that?
To get, I'm sorry, if say it again, in HD.
Sure. I know I stumbled on my words a little bit there. But do we have a REST API that someone can use to bring in an HTTPS URL or widget as a walled garden from another system?
I think so. We have a lot of REST APIs. I don't know specifically offhand, you know, but we also support walled garden environments. So I would think so, but we'd have to double check the documentation.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Sounds wonderful. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining. Hope this was helpful. Feel free to leave us feedback. And if you need any more information, as I mentioned, just reach out to me, or you can check our website, whichever you feel most comfortable with.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.